Hey, I'm Pete Gould. I talk to you one more time here about something. This is the front section of the Dodge diesel vacuum pump from 1996 to 2002. I did a seal kit replacement video. It's about an hour long, and I talked about the drive coupler gear here, but I didn't get into depth about it, and I get so many calls and people don't really understand that I'm going to do another video for you, and this will be a little bit long, but it's going to go into a whole lot of stuff so you can understand real clearly what's going on with your vacuum pump, why your steering doesn't work, or what happens to this drive coupler gear up around 180,000 miles or so on the four-wheel drives, and how it breaks the drive dogs off. And we'll talk about the front section just a little bit, and we'll talk about the rotor, and we'll talk about the gears and things that go wrong, and I'll show you the tool that we used, that Provident tool up in Indiana made for me. Old Craig, he's got to be the best guy in the world. He can figure anything out. To extract the drive coupler gear and replace it when it goes bad, which they also make for us. So anyhow, I'm going to get with it, and I'll get into this, and you'll have a much better understanding of what might have went wrong with your truck. Now, this is my cameraman, Mr. Tripod, so bear with me. I'm winging this one on my own here. We'll get it done somehow or another. Let's get it on. All right. Now, this is the front section of the vacuum pump. Once you take it off, this is the gear that goes into your timing case and rotates from the injector pump. And that's what turns the rotor inside that holds the vanes. You see the vanes down inside the rotor there, and they come out like that. And that's caused by centrifugal force while this rotates. Now, if you want to replace your vanes, simply you slide them forward like that. You just pull them out. That's how you're going to clean them out, or clean them up, but that's how you get them out. You just slide them forward. If they don't come forward, take a little pin or something, get behind them if you can. Come on. Just slide it forward like that. Pull it out. That's it. Now, these vanes inside here, where the edge gets sharp, the fiber on here gets kind of degraded and full of metal, or it gets weather checked after all the years, and you can replace them. We sell these vanes, we make them, and Gino's Garage also sells them, because the end is supposed to be round like you see there. And when you get a new set of vanes and you're putting them in your pump, you're going to want to drop them in with the round edge facing out towards the barrel inside here. You just drop them in there, and that's all there is to it. When you rotate that, that'll come around, and that'll push that in just like that. You drop the next one in. Slide it out, take it out. The flat edge, again, right there like that, faces in. So anyhow, this is the coupler gear. And what happens over time, if you look on this one, you can see the edges are just starting to get sharp, and almost there's a little cut there. This is the drive coupler disc. And the drive coupler disc goes over top of the drive coupler gear. And there's another gear on the end of the steering pump, similar to the drive coupler gear. This is on the end of your steering pump. It's called a hub. And it goes in through the oil seal that you'd be replacing and locks into the coupler disc, so that when the injector pump gear turns the vacuum pump, of course, it rotates the gear, and that's what turns your steering pump. So, as you can see, this one here, you can see that real sharp hook on there. It's time. This one's just about ready to go. Now, it's a more severe case you'll see here, and we do these all day. This one here. Now, this one here, you can see right there, boy, that's sharp. Both ends are really cut, and if you look down through there, you put your coupler gear on it, you could see that thing is really shot. That's one of those may-go gears. It may go now, it may go in about 5 minutes, but it's going to go. So anyhow, it's time to replace that. And then what happens is you look down in there, you don't see anything, because this is a result of what happens when the drive dogs break off the end of that. And all you'll see is something like this when you look into your vacuum pump. So we replace the gear, we make these gears, and then when the gear goes in the coupler disc, it fits like it's supposed to. And that's how that works. So I'll get on to it and show you how we extract that with this tool here that Craig of Provident Tool made for me. And that'll explain a lot of things to you. I'll talk to you about a couple other things while I'm standing here. This is what the rotor itself looks like when it's taken out of the vacuum pump. And there's no bushings or bearings or anything on this, amazingly. It just runs inside the machine surface of the barrel. Just runs in there, and the oil line fills it with oil, and that's what lubricates it. Now, inside there, if you see that hole, there's two of them, one for the shaft, of course, and there's one right there. That hole, that's the oil return hole. And the oil fills up, and it goes back through there, and this faces down, and the oil goes back into the timing case, and that's where the oil goes after it goes through here. The oil line on the bottom is what fills the vacuum pump. It's not the return line. Now, a lot of times what happens is somebody will get in there and they'll replace your injector pump, and they don't realize that inside the injector pump there's a keyway, and the keyway holds a gear onto the injector pump. When they pull it out of the timing case, that keyway falls down between the vacuum pump, which is sitting in here, and here's the injector pump, and that keyway falls down right in between the vacuum pump gear and the cam gear. And it's solid steel, it's a hard keyway. And so they put your new pump back in on top of everything, your injector pump, get it running, and when they fire it up, that steel gear in here gets caught between the teeth of the vacuum pump and the cam gear. There's so much of a big hard bang when that happens. Here's what happens, if you can see that. It hits so hard that this housing, see the crack in there, the fracture? That's from this thing going bang and moving enough to move up like that. Now give me just a second here, and I'll show you what happened to that nice gear in the front. Here's a couple of them. See that gear? What happened to the teeth on that? I know the feeling talking about teeth, but anyway, that's what happens after the gear gets dropped down in there. It's another victim of the old killer dowel pin happens, but generally on the newer motors, it's when someone drops that in there. Here's another one. And this thing will go around in there, and every time those teeth hit, you'll hear a click, 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 click. You won't know what the heck that noise is, but generally, if you got a clicking noise up there right in the very front where this vacuum pump, where it goes into the timing case, that's what you're going to find. And other times, this gear gets hit so hard, it just shears off. The whole front of this shaft just busts off, even right there, and this drops down into the timing case, and it starts bouncing around off the crank and everything else down in there, the gears. So anyhow, that's a little story about that. Again, this is what they look like, the coupler gear itself, once the teeth finally break off. There's no teeth, so now you have nothing to turn your steering pump. Okay, let's get on to the next few things I'm going to talk about. Just as a quick note here, since I never mentioned it, the front section of the vacuum pump, on the two section, as you can see here, both of these are busted right here, just about in the same exact place. And that's where you would find your coupler gear down inside there, and your seal retainer here. And this goes on to the vacuum pump like that, and everything goes in there when you get it together and bolts up. But anyhow, a lot of them broke, and that wastes the vacuum pump. And what happens when that breaks, or the reason why so many of them did break like that and like that, if you find that, hey, you're done. We don't make that part and we can't get it. If I could have got that years and years ago, I'd be a millionaire. I'd be doing something with Clint Eastwood instead of this. But anyhow, they all broke. And the reason they broke, I find on most of them, is this bracket right here. This is the Cummins part. And let me give you the part number. So it's 3919619. And this bracket, this goes on the lower right inside stud of the power steering pump and connects to the injector pump on most trucks, and one or two of them it goes to the block. But this used to go right here on the lower right inside stud of the vacuum pump where the steering pump plugs into it. And this would attach, and this keeps all the torque and the weight of the steering pump that goes into this, and this tries to go like this, and this holds it still so it can't. And a lot of them fell off, or they cracked right through the top here. And once that no longer has support, all the torque and steering from especially a four-wheel drive with big tires, or something you're using for a snow plow, or something you're towing a big heavy trailer with all the time, or working out in the fields, once that bracket breaks, this thing's toast. And that's what happens to that. Anyhow, I thought I'd mention that, and remember that part in case you gotta find one, because Cummins will tell you you gotta buy the whole injector pump bracket, and it's about 95 bucks, and you don't. They make this part 3919619. What the heck they call it here? Bracket, vacuum pump. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? Well, you can buy that, and it's about $6. That's a couple of things you might want to know. Save you some trouble. Well, back to the coupler gear here. This is the rotor that the vanes go in. And this is a bent one I took out of there only because the same thing happened. That gear got hit, and it actually bends this too when it's inside the housing there. And see, this one I took the coupler gear off of. Now, if you look at either one of these pumps, you can see that there's a hole right here in the drive coupler gear. And also here it's pressed onto the rotor, so there's a corresponding hole. Now, if I take a paper clip, I could push that through there, just like you see. Now, if the gear is on there, I could push that through there, same way, just like you see. Now, a lot of people thinking when you look in there, it sure looks like there's a roll pin, a shear pin, whatever you want to call it, down inside there. And there's not. This is an oil lubrication hole. That bearing at the end there is peened in to keep the oil inside the shaft when it comes shooting up through these pressure sides here, and pushes through there to lubricate that when it's spinning in this part of the housing. That's where that goes inside there like that. And of course that's where the coupler disc goes. And the steering pump goes into that and locks in. But anyhow, that's what happens. The oil comes through here. Man, I get these things back. That thing's drilled out to 1/2 inch wide where this whole piece is junk. People trying to get that pin out of there. There's no pin on there. That thing's pressed on there tight as you could get. And I'll show you when I take one of these off how tight that thing's on there and how that tool works to do that. So let me take a breather here and we'll get on to that. Another quick note here. This is what a 3-section pump looks like as opposed to the 2-section pump. This is from 91.5 through 1995 on the intercooled engines, and I try and explain to people how to identify that. And this pump is held together on the back with two 17mm nuts that go on here with 2 lock washers as opposed to the 2-section pump. And if you look, you can see there's a center section in here. This they call the adapter, the 3rd piece. And here's the center section, which is held on by these 3 10mm head screws. This is missing one, but there's 3 screws that hold that on. And then that comes off. You just take these screws off the center section like that. I'll show you real quick, and you'll see the rotor. See, there's the rotor inside there. That's a crummy old pump. But anyhow, that's it. And this is the center section, which a 2-section won't have. But when you look down in it, you'll see there's another drive gear on there, the coupler gear, which is the same from 91.5 all the way up to 02 and the coupler disc. And you'll get the same picture when you look down inside there, if that's broke or not. And they do break on the earlier ones, however, not quite. Sorry, what I was saying was that the 3-section pump doesn't tend to break that gear off as much, and I think it's mainly because the trucks don't have the same amount of horsepower on them, and the 91 to 95 trucks, they just don't seem to break that off for some reason as frequent as the 96 to 02 do. And that's what I got to say about that. Now, how we extract the gear, there's probably a lot of ways, but like I say, my friend Craig made this tool for me, and you can see in here that the collar itself, see a little ring in there, is going to fit inside of the coupler gear on the vacuum pump itself. And he made this tool so I could take these off while I'm rebuilding them when I take the pump completely apart. I do just a rotor, the jaws go on there, collar, and the shim grabs that, and it's going to go in the press as I'll show you. And this tool, and I tell you what, I've used this thousands of times, is going to go between the drive dogs if they're still on there, and we're going to press the rotor shaft right out of the coupler gear, and the tool will hold the broken gear. When we press it back on, we'll use this tool because you don't want to press on the drive dogs of the new gear, or you'd fold them in. So this goes over top of that when you press it onto the rotor, and we'll line those 2 holes up perfectly like that when we press it on, so that this hole is over top of that hole, like you see it on the gears here that are still on the pumps themselves. Now, if you can't get the pin through here, like I was showing you earlier, to put a paper clip or a toothpick through here, but generally just blow some air in there and you'll see daylight. But if this won't go through, you want to check this gear surface here to see if there might be a fracture in it, because if this cracks, then it's able to spin on the rotor shaft itself, and it'll never come back and line up with those 2 holes again that I've ever seen. I've seen a few of them, and these hairline cracks are extremely hard to see, but that's the dead giveaway. Now, I've seen an awful lot of remanufactured pumps with the hubs on them that split. And if you look very, very close too on your steering pump, if this is all in good shape and that hole lines up and you can get a hole through it and you don't have steering or brakes, and probably the shaft inside of your steering pump has broken. And if you grab a hold of the shaft of the steering pump and pull on it, chances are you'll be able to pull that shaft right out of there, because although there's a gear just as thick as this, the hub on the end of it the shaft that it's pressed in onto is as skinny as a pencil, and there's not much to it. There's just a little tiny spline in there that interlocks with the impeller and the steering pump, and it shears, or anything can happen, and it's not your vacuum pump. If those drive dogs are on there and you could see daylight through that hole, your problem is never going to be inside your vacuum pump. It's going to be the steering pump itself. So I'll show you how we get this gear off there and how we replace it real quick, which is what I was getting on this whole thing to do in the beginning. Now I'm set up in my press so that the rotor, if I could show you this here a little bit better, the rotor clears my press plates down below. The coupler gear is facing up. Now this tool that I'm going to drive in there has a notch on both sides of it to fit the teeth of the coupler gear there, the two drive dogs on it. And that fits down on top of the shaft. Now when I press the shaft, while the tool holds the coupler gear, and a lot of these are on there tight. Let's see what this one does. I'm going to press the shaft through. There it goes. I'm pressing the shaft. Go down a little bit here. See the shaft coming down? And I'm pressing the shaft right through my tool. And there's a shaft and the gear is off. There's a million ways you could figure out with another type puller or something to grab hold of that. When I pull this out, there you can see the gear has been extracted from the shaft. Now I'll show you how we put it back on. Now with my installation tool, I set the tool right here in between the end of the press and the top of the new coupler gear. You can see the oil hole in the shaft and the oil hole in the new coupler gear, and they need to be aligned when you push that on. I've always used and still use a vane, and I take the straight edge of the vane and I line up the center on the center of the hole. And again, this tool is designed not to press on a drive dogs. If you were doing this, you'd put a piece of square stock or something in between the drive dogs on the inside there in the center to press down on once you had the center aligned. So now I'll press the new gear on. And when it's done, it's all the way down at the bottom. It'll stop, and your holes will be aligned. Now, if they're not perfectly aligned, you'll still get plenty of oil through them, but you want them close. That's it. That's how you put that back on. When you look inside there, you can see the hole came out right on the center. But then again, I've done this plenty of times. So that's how the gear gets extracted from that. And this tool will also do it without pulling the pump apart. We take them apart anyway, so we can clean the barrel and stuff up, which I'll show you a good way how you could do that at home. Now, if you want to press your rotor out so that you can access the barrel with the rotor out, like this is here, what you would do is you would put this in the press with this facing up, the rotor shaft itself. And you put your press plates underneath here so that the rotor clears the press plates. And your press plates will be here and here. And you face this up, and when you push down on the rotor shaft itself, the rotor will push right through and this gear will come off and the rotor shaft will come out. Then you'll have in your hand the front barrel assembly, just like you see here. And now if you want to clean this up, I could show you a really neat trick to do it. Right there at home, it'll come out just like new. You can go to the hardware store, Ace Hardware has them, and buy these flapper wheels. These little plastic wheels with the sandpaper on them. They're about $6 a piece. They come in all kinds of different grids and everything else. And if you're real chewed up, get you a heavy grid. If you're not bad at all like this, get you a fine or get you a couple and start. And with some oil in there and a drill motor, run that up and down in there. And it's only aluminum, and it's very soft aluminum. And run that up and down in there 25 or 30 times. You can get an electric drill, it'll run a little faster. And then look inside there, and you can see it'll polish that up and take all the scratches out and everything else in there. A high-speed drill will really clean it up. You can see it didn't take much at all, and that'll work fine when you're done. Just run that up and down. When you're done looking there, and that really looks nice. And put your rotor back in, and take your gear. Make sure the letters and numbers on the gear are facing you, and press it back down on there. And when you're done, there ought to be, well, that's a little bit more than usual, but here's one I've got finished with the new gear, the rotor, and the new vanes, and it's finished. And you see that the letters and the numbers are facing forward. A good 1/8 inch end play in there is about what they come out with. So, anyhow, that's what I got to say about that, and I hope it gives you a little better understanding, shows you some way to fix that. Anyhow, we sell the seal kit as you've seen in our other video, and we sell the front section when we have them repaired and all done if you don't want to do it yourself. It's $199 exchange, and it comes with our seal kit, complete with the tools and everything like you've seen in the other video that show you how to do that. We make the seal retainers. If you take it apart and you find that someone went in there that didn't really know what they were doing and got a screwdriver and stuff and scratched all this up inside the seal retainer trying to get the seal out because they didn't know this came out, if that's scratched up inside there, you'll still drip oil when you're done. So anyhow, you can imagine the things I've seen done to these. And that's it. If you just need a seal retainer, we also sell just a seal retainer kit with the DVD and the seals, the O-rings. Sorry about that, what I was saying before my cameraman took another break there. This comes with a spare set of seals and O-rings in that kit. And it does that just because, like I said, it's handy to have, and I still mess them up putting together now and then, pushing that in there or chafe that or something. So you don't have to call me and say, you know, I need something quick, my truck's down. It comes in the kit. And now for those of you, or the one of you, or whoever that says that we pirate our parts out of a Cummins diesel kit and redo them, well, we don't. These are our seals. We make them, and we went to a great trouble to make it perfect the way it is. We make these ourselves. They're our own seal. It's a Gould Gear part. You couldn't buy it if you wanted to. The O-rings, there they are. We make them ourselves. It's a Gould Gear part, and we went through all this, and it works perfect. there's the lower O-rings. So just to let you see, these parts don't come out of somebody else's stuff. We make it ourselves. And I'm proud of it. And we have plenty of them if you need them. So anyhow, that was a lot of work. Now let's get back to what we were talking about. That's just one of those things. You can't believe everything you read online. I wanted to tell you something before I finish this up. This is a vacuum gauge, and you can get a vacuum gauge at AutoZone or anywhere, and they're not much more than 15, 16 bucks if I remember right. And if you want to test your system, because so many people call here, want to buy a new vacuum pump, and they don't need a vacuum pump. There's nothing wrong with their vacuum pump. And I was just talking to a nice guy called out of Texas. I told him I was doing this so he'd understand it. And I was telling him that, you know, the basics of this is pretty simple. Anyhow, these vacuum pumps I've seen, this front section that we're dealing with and talking about rebuilding, where it looked like a hand grenade went off inside this thing, and it was missing one of those vanes, and it was still pulling the same range of vacuum it would pull if you checked it. And it's very, very rare that a vacuum pump goes bad vacuum wise unless the truck is sit for a while and the vanes get stuck inside there. But anyhow, if you want to check it, get yourself a vacuum gauge, and on the side of your vacuum pump is a check valve. And either it's going to face up like this or stick straight out. And you'll take your vacuum gauge first and plug it directly onto the vacuum pump. That's most important. Don't plug it into the system or anything. The first thing you want to do is get a reading straight out of the vacuum pump. And when you start the truck up and it's idling, this vacuum gauge will read between 25 and 30, sitting there idling. Providing, this is important, that the truck is idling at least where the factory had it set. And I'll explain that to you. This rotor inside here spins, and centrifugal force is what throws these vanes out. As you spin it, see the vane in there? Well, when it spins, that vane comes out, and that's what makes the vacuum. And if your truck is idling in the summer lower, the 24 valves, the later engines that are computer controlled, the ISB engines, that idle is controlled. It never leaves or idles lower, but from 98.5 back before the ISB engines, the 24 valves, the 6BT motors could idle down in time, and there is an idle adjustment on there to turn it up. But if it's idling too slow, then this is turning slower, and it can't create the amount of vacuum that you need to make your brakes work proper, like if you're backing up 2 or 3 stabs and your pedal gets hard. But what causes that, 9 times out of 10, back to the vacuum gauge, is a leak in your system. So if you plug this onto your vacuum pump and you're idling, or you step on the gas just a tiny bit if you're in one of the older trucks, and this will pull up and hold in between 25 and 30, your vacuum pump is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Now take this and plug it into your system after you put your line back onto the vacuum pump and read it. And now you might be reading up in here somewhere. And what that's telling you is one of your vacuum lines has a pinhole in it, a leak, or something like that. And that's 9 times out of 10 is what causes it. Up by the firewall, there's a couple little elbows that go across to the passenger side and then into the truck. They dry rot any place. That little reducer thing that goes on top of this that looks like a witch's hat, it rots out or it leaks down here, and you want to check that. And once you isolate it down and you bring your system back up to here, your brakes and everything will work fine again. Now, if you're in a 95 or lower and you don't have Hydro Boost brakes and you have vacuum assist brakes, which is the big round black disc in the back of your master cylinder there, if your power assist unit back there, what they call the brake booster, has a leak in it, the way to tell that is if you're idling in your system and this is holding up here around 30 and you step on the brake and this thing drops down to 0, that means your booster's shot. So there's a diaphragm inside there. If your foot's not on the brake, it'll hold vacuum, but as soon as you step on the brake and it depletes your vacuum and this goes boop, then that means your booster is probably shot. Now, an easy way to fix that too real quick would be to run a piece of vacuum line from straight off here, straight off your vacuum pump hanging off the side. Take a piece of hose and put it on here and go straight to your brake booster and eliminate your truck and just go straight to your brakes. And if your brakes work really good, because that was your problem, then you got a leak in one of them little lines on there. They're brown. They look like brown wires that they use for vacuum lines. And if you take your fingers and run them down along those little tubes that are vacuum lines and you feel a rough spot like right there, it's probably been rubbing on something and it'll rub a little pinhole in it or something. They're smooth as glass, but look at that little piece there and investigate it and you might see a pinhole, and all you got to do is take a razor blade and cut that and then open up the ends with a little paper clip or something and get some surgical tube or vacuum line, something really small that you could plug that right back together again, and just use a piece of vacuum tube or something about the size of your windshield washer squirter hose and plug the two pieces of the vacuum line back together just like that, and you're done. You're spliced. Your problems are fixed. Reread your vacuum gauge and see if it comes back up to 30. And a lot of times, where the lines come together on the transfer case, or where they go into the little switch on the driver's side fender from the 95's back, it'll leak right there, and that makes your brake light come on for the low vacuum. But it's usually not the vacuum pump causing the problem. And I got an awful lot of good vacuum pumps in the mail from people they said were shot. There's nothing wrong with them. So, anyhow, that's it. And if you have any questions anytime, you just give me a call. 7 days a week, 828-644-1900. And my name is Pete, and I own this company. And there's not too much I don't know about these Dodge Diesels. I'll be happy to help you with anything. You just give me a call. You don't have to buy anything. I'll try and help you with your frustration. I learned under these trucks, and I learned a whole lot about them, fixing my own. I'm more than happy to pass this information on to you. Thanks a lot. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It didn't put you to sleep. And I got to put my cameraman away now. He's a union guy. So y'all have a nice day, and thank you very much.